Which way you going?
I'm going under because I think he's going to
Okay.
focus on it.
I will go over. I see Brad Spielberg in our guest slot, and he now joins us here on Birds 365. Good to have you, Brad. Dak Prescott, 9.5 interceptions this year. Under, over. Which way you going, Spielberg?
I'll lean under. He has an interception rate of 2%. It's bottom 10 in the history of the NFL. So, his number was super high last year. I get that. But he is actually one of the least interception throwing quarterbacks of all time.
I think it'll be a correction. And he's focused on it, too. So I think he'll be more cognizant. And as Brad points out, he doesn't have a history of throwing a ton of interceptions. So I think that was a little bit out of character. Unless the descent has started, and he's 30. I don't think we're going to see this massive fall off a cliff, but Eagles fans no doubt are hopeful to see it, Brad. I mentioned Zach Martin. What can you tell us about Zach Martin as it relates to the rest of the NFL in the guard market? Because, this is a first ballot Hall of Fame player. So
I just saw that come through. The interesting thing there is, and he is a no doubt first ballot. I think he's been the best guard in the NFL for the last, 5-6 years in a row. Is that when he signed his deal, there were a couple deals in his range, but basically he was the top of the market for a long time. Now that the guard market has broken through, you have two guys making $20 million plus per year. I think he's sitting around at 14 or something like that. I think now it makes a whole lot of sense that he's saying, look, I only have a couple earning years left. I'm still playing at the peak of my ability. Now is the time to strike because that market has kind of skyrocketed. He has every right to ask for more money, and the Cowboys would be smart to give it to him.
And different teams handle that situation differently. Some go, hey, you signed a contract, you signed a contract. We both signed, we signed off on good faith, and we expect you to honor it. And other teams will go compared to the rest of the league, we want a happy guy here. We got to admit he's outplayed the deal that we had. Where do the Cowboys fall into that mix? Are they a team more likely to go, hey, a deal's a deal? Or are they more likely to go, yeah, let's sit down and see if we can compromise this out?
They are definitely in the first bucket, more likely to say a deal's a deal. But I do think they would understand the situation here where, they've actually gotten some concessions from players like DeMarcus Lawrence gave them a restructured, reworked deal that paid him less money. And, because he missed a little time with injury, things like that. So I think when you establish relationships where you're honest with each other, you go back and forth and say, maybe we'll pay you less, we'll pay you more, whatever. Here, I think they're smart enough to realize they have to do it. They're still not spending a ton of cash. I don't think they're going to extend CeeDee Lamb this offseason. Maybe Trevon Diggs at corner gets a new deal. But yeah, I think they would be dumb to not do it. He could have asked for this 2 off seasons ago, frankly.
All right, running backs, Brad. Let's get to it. I mean, what the heck are they trying to accomplish? I mean, I feel for them, empathy for their sort of lot in this league, but I don't know how complaining on social media affects supply and demand. I mean, nobody in the media is saying plenty of people do, but I think you saw Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry, and they came together and said, look, this kind of crap devalues our position as a whole. Nobody's listening to us when it comes to GMs in this league. They're looking at the value of particular players in the modern game, and they've come to the conclusion that this position is not as valuable as others. How do you fix that?
Yeah, I think it is one of the dumbest narratives that analytics nerds or whatever are the cause for this. It couldn't be further from the truth. Apparently we know nothing, but then we're also influencing how the GMs play an entire position, right? So, look, I mean, you look in 2011, Adrian Peterson signed a deal for $14 million a year. Chris Johnson signed a deal for about $13.5 million a year 12 years ago, and now guys aren't touching those numbers. And it's because, the shelf life of the position is by 27, 28 years old. You are probably declining and oftentimes declining at a fairly rapid rate. So, the NIL money is a good thing. And honestly, because that is prime earning years for running back. So hopefully Bijan Robinson made a whole bunch of money at Texas last year. And then, if you want to shorten rookie contracts, and people keep saying only for running backs, you have to shorten it for everybody, because if you only shortened it for running backs, teams wouldn't draft running backs that early. So that would be one. You used to be able to get extended after 2 years. Now it's after 3 years. And then lastly, obviously this is very niche for a couple players, but for these franchise tag guys, there is a provision in the CBA that says you have to have a good faith negotiation. It's super vague. You can easily get around it. I'm sure it's never been enforced in the history of the league. I think you make it a little bit more specific with franchise tags and say, in my opinion, what it should say, or something like this, is you must submit a multi-year offer that contains in full guaranteed money 2 franchise tags, right? Because that is what you're working off of. You're saying we can tag you twice and let you go. We don't have to pay you. So for Saquon Barkley, for instance, it's about $22.2 million fully guaranteed, which would have been near the top of the market. I think would have been a relatively fair number to work off of. Say this must be fully guaranteed in a multi-year offer, something like that. But otherwise, it's as bleak as it can possibly be.
Right. And your suggestion that you just put out there, I like it. Sounds good. Sounds fair to me. We're 7 years to go before the next CBA. They can't put it in for 7 years. So much crap could have changed between now and 7 years. You don't think there's any chance that both sides go, hey, let's talk this out. Let's do an collective bargaining agreement negotiation to take care of our running back. You don't think there's any chance of that actually happening, do you?
Not really. That's the thing is people saying, oh, they should unionize just their position. Like, guys, they can't even agree. The high earners versus the low earners can agree on a CBA. That's why they got killed last time and get killed most of the time. It's just there are so differing interests in the collective bargaining unit that is the players. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, and obviously the players that do get significant money, starting with the quarterbacks. I mean, when you do have a cap league, even though it's very malleable, there is a trickle down effect. So obviously the more money quarterbacks get, the less money for everybody else. And those guys aren't going to be in line saying, no, we should take a little bit less to help out. Now, some will over the years. We know some guys go for the best contract. We see it every year at any position, and others will take they might want to go to Florida for the tax situation, or Texas. They might want to ring chase later in their career and take a little bit of less money. It's always about the individual, but bottom line is, I don't know how you fix supply and demand, Brad. I mean, there's an oversupply of running backs and the demand's not there, and that's what it comes out. I don't know how you fix that.
Right. It's that simple. No, I'm with you. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. It's crazy. And the fact that Austin Eckler, I saw it was Eckler, Derrick Henry, and there might have been one other.
Najee Harris, I think.
Yeah. And I kind of picked on Matt Miller's a draft guy, and Matt put out a tweet that we've all said. If I were an NFL GM, I would draft a running back. If he was really good, I would franchise him and then probably draft another running back and start the cycle over again, because that makes sense from a financial perspective. Pointing out it is dehumanizing. That's one thing people have pointed out, which I agree with. But that's what makes GM jobs difficult. Like, we don't have to deal with that. You and I, as a reporter, you as a cap analyst, you don't have to deal with that human aspect. GMs have to deal with that. That's what makes the job tough. But, man, I mean, guys get cut. They get traded. Is this new to people?
Right. Yeah, I mean, no, it's tough, right, too, because I think the position's so, at the focal point, we see them carry the ball so often, they get hit so often. Like, there's such a, weird dichotomy between their lack of value and the trend of that going down more and more, but also the fact that they're still kind of faces of franchises a lot of the times, or they're a guy you're going to hear a lot about and talk a lot about. So it is funny, though, like, guys getting mad at Matt Miller's tweet, when get mad at the people making the decisions, not a guy who's just tweeting what the decision is. But, I get their frustration. I guess I shouldn't tell them how to go about it. It's tough times.
But see if you align with me on this. When all this stuff kind of leading up to not getting any of the deals done, all three have to live on the franchise tag this year. I said, this puts pressure on above and beyond those three players. Bijan Robinson. because somebody's got to go above and beyond. If you want to see a market correction, a course correction, somebody's got to force feed that, which means you have to have a player that just is better than everybody, and he has to get paid. And he is a guy that they'll actually say, we're going to run the football more than any other average NFL team because we've got the best one doing it. Does Bijan know that? Do you think going into this year that he was taken higher than a running back's been taken a long time? Again, Jody McDonald's comments, Brad Spielberger's comments. He's a once every 5-year back. He's a once every 10-year back. It's out there. It doesn't really mean anything or prove anything, but people talked about Bijan that way before the draft. How much pressure is on this young man his rookie season?
Yeah, it's crazy because you're dead on. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is eligible for an extension this offseason. I think he needs to get something done. Otherwise, it literally comes down to Bijan, who has yet to play an NFL snap, is the next big name because, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, they're not going to get there. So, he's already carrying the weight of the running back market on his shoulders, and he hasn't played a snap yet. But like you said, Atlanta is going to lead the NFL in rushes, probably by a comfortable margin. So he'll have the opportunity, but again, is that a bad thing? Are they going to use that against him and say, "Oh, a lot of wear and tear, yada
wear
yada"?
And tear on the tires. Oh, that's
exactly.
coming out, Brad.
Yeah. So good luck to him,
Brad. I know we talked about in the past Jalen Hurts' contract, his extension, but I don't think I asked you what you think personally of the structure of the contract because it is unique. Compared to most, and what you think the positives are for the Eagles and the negatives. They tend to be ahead of the curve on this kind of stuff, but I don't know if we're going to see people copying the structure, or maybe we will. What's your sort of personal assessment of that contract?
Yeah, so there certainly were positives and negatives. The cash flows year to year are a little bit lower in the early years, which is really what's going to enable them to spend more and keep talent, which they obviously did throughout the offseason, and also maybe pick their spots to add some talent as well. The low cap hits that everyone talked about obviously helps in that regard as well. But I think it's a massive, massive risk to do just basically an option bonus in every single season and prorate a lot of this money. We saw with Carson Wentz the disaster outcome of that approach, where you have so much prorated money and there's a sunk cost component associated with it that you can't really get out of. So I don't think Hurts going to fall off a cliff or anything. It's just you are taking a gamble when you already they basically pre-restructured the entire deal. I'm not going to get super too into the weeds. You can kind of undo that and get salary cap credits and this whole thing. But anyway, it's a good deal. I like the structure from an aggressiveness standpoint. They are trying to win, I think, a Super Bowl with, Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. I think they really want to win one now. But yeah, it certainly carries risks with it as well.
Right. But for the first couple of years, it's great for the Eagles if at some point they can restructure, to have the availability of the money in the first couple of years. But if there's a catastrophic injury or somewhere along the line, they're out there on a bit of a limb. But we certainly don't believe that's going to happen with Jalen. But how the hell do we know? Here's what I want to know about your opinion of Jalen Hurts. PFF, John called it. I'm now borrowing a phrase from Jeff Lurie, and John didn't say this, but I'm paraphrasing. The gold standard of evaluating and putting in order and evaluating.
Boy, I didn't say that. Yeah,
okay.
I didn't say gold
John,
standard.
do me a favor.
I said best of a bad lot.
Oh, okay. Trying to make Brad feel good about being PFF. All right, the best of a bad lot. Since
I'll take
it. Wait. Best of a bad lot.
But numero uno's number one. Anything way you slice number one, it's nice to be number one.
That's what I just want to get the full context. Because I don't want to say bad lot, Pro Football Focus as a whole. I'm just not a big fan of basic statistics for quarterbacks. So when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, I always look at PFF first, and I say it's the best of a bad lot for evaluating how quarterbacks are playing. That was the.
I know this wasn't the question, but I'll tell it just, I'm not going to defend every single thing we do. There is some pretty strong stability year to year with quarterback grades. They're pretty accurate. So.
And where John and I are similar but different, I think best of a bad lot. Oh, I'll use that exact phrase. Best of a bad lot is passer ratings. It's imperfect. I can point to how imperfect it is, but it's as good a statistical way of judging as any that's out there. Kind of like democracy is the worst government on the planet, except for every other government, which it's better than. So it's the same exact thing. Jalen Hurts, 2023, will he be better than he was in 2022? Will he be worse than he was in 2022? And how does PFF go about evaluating that?
Yeah, I think it could go either way. Obviously, had a phenomenal season. I think we saw him grow in a lot of areas where, frankly, Philadelphia maybe wasn't even sure how it was going to go. I know there's been reports that they explored a Russell Wilson trade and other alternatives throughout the season, or before the season, excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, you get another year of chemistry to develop with all your weapons. I think it's transitioning from Isaac Seumalo to whoever starts playing, at the guard spot now will be interesting, whether it's Jurgens or somebody else. But I think he could be even better. I mean, they didn't lose a whole lot of talent. They are still in the NFC, so they're going to have some easy games on their schedule. Maybe not the easiest schedule in the NFL, which I think we had it as the easiest strength of schedule in the league last year. Could go either way. I don't think we really evaluate how, if a guy, there's variance. It's random, right? Is he going to stay healthy? Is everyone else on the team going to stay healthy? But there's no reason to expect a drop off. If anything, you should expect a slight increase as he's now more confident and comfortable throwing outside the numbers, getting rid of the ball quickly, or taking some time and letting a play develop. Like, I think his confidence is going to lead to better results. And I think that increased every week last year.
Yeah, and that's been Jalen's history. The Eagles kind of pointed out all the time, Brad, the fact that he's gotten incrementally better every season, which is rare. You usually have sort of an EKG, some ups, some downs. Going back to Alabama, he's gotten a little bit better each season, and I expect that to continue. But I think some of it might be esoteric because the numbers were so good, and I am not as big a fan as passer rating as Jody is. I think his passer rating was 101.5. I'm just saying it off the top of my somewhere in that range. I think he'd be better quarterback and it'd be 97 or 96, but he makes better decisions, quicker processing. And that's where I think PFF comes in, and they take that, and that's a coaching staff takes that into account as well. But I think there's a lot of fans that will just look at, well, his passing yards are down, or his passer ratings down, or the passing yards down. They have a tougher schedule. I mean, they're playing a more difficult grouping of teams. I think his running numbers might be down because they pass more, not because they want to protect him, but because they're probably going to have a lot closer games in the fourth quarter. All that stuff comes into the equation, but that's also esoteric. Am I crazy for saying he could be less statistically, but a better quarterback?
No, not at all. I think you're spot on. I mean, I guess that the fourth quarter point is interesting, right? Where his stats were incredible last year. Maybe they won't be as good, but also maybe the volume stats are better because they're actually throwing the football in the fourth quarter because they actually have to do so. So, yeah, the stats are, I'm not going to say they're not important. They are, but they are one piece of the picture, just like a grade is. You have to look at everything, and that's why I think it's great to have so many different resources and kind of cross compare a million different things, because it's just impossible to boil it all down into one number.
Okay, but I'm going to ask you to do just that.
Boil it down.
What's your favorite number as far as evaluating a quarterback? Is there a stat where you go, all right, imperfect, like McMullen and McDonald giving themselves a backdoor out? I'm going to take the backdoor and say it's imperfect. But again, it's all about ranking. It's all about what position you put them in. What in your mind is the best stat that is the most telltale for a QB?
Yeah. It probably adjusted net yards per attempt, which you can see on Pro Football Reference. It takes yards per attempt, but adjusts for touchdowns and interceptions. Gets a little bit more in the weeds than that. You can see the whole description of exactly how it's calculated online, but that is a metric that has some stability that paints a clearer picture. If you wanted just one stat for a quarterback, that has historically been, my favorite.
All right, I want to go to the NFC side as a whole, Brad, and I want you to come up with a team I think we all look at it and say the Eagles are the betting favorites. They're clearly the best team on paper in my mind, because San Francisco, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be, and they could talk about Brock Purdy being healthy for week 1. I'll believe it when I see it. Dallas, I think, is going to be very good. Then you have a drop off. Who's that next team? Who's going to surprise us? Your Chicago Bears, the Detroit Lions. A lot of people are on Seattle. Kind of, if you believe in Geno Smith, or you believe it was sort of crazy. I think Minnesota's taking a step back. Who do you see? Somebody who can jump up and surprise us?
Yeah, it's those two you mentioned. It's Detroit and Seattle. In particular, I think I'm very, very high on Seattle compared to the market. With the concerns in San Francisco that you mentioned, right? Where, is Purdy going to be healthy? Is he going to be the same guy as last year after getting, elbow reconstructive surgery, whatever? They had so many young players that, rookie starting tackles on both sides of the line last year in Seattle. Rookie corner was obviously your stud. But you added more really good young players, and you get growth from the guys that played last year. I think they should be better at a lot of spots. And I think Geno, maybe he's not incredible, but I think he's now established a decent baseline. He led us in touchdown passes over 20 yards by, I think, 5 or 6. Like, he was not just checking it down and taking the easy road. Like, he was pushing the ball downfield. So even if that regresses a little bit, I think he still can win in the intermediate areas and win a lot of football games. So them in Detroit, Detroit is obviously in this terrible division in the NFC North. They have a lot of talent. I'm just not as sold. Their defensive line isn't super inspiring to me. Yes, they kind of fixed their entire secondary, which should be much, much better. But then you get the suspension for Jameson Williams. So it's kind of like, for the first 6 weeks, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown and question mark. So, yeah, those two, though, I think are the next step.
How much, because I'm a Seattle guy, too, I actually think Seattle can be as good as Dallas. I think it's 1-2, Philadelphia, San Francisco, then a drop-off rather than 1-2-3 and a bigger drop-off. I'm on the Seattle bandwagon with you. How much does the re-addition of Bobby Wagner mean to them? You watched more film on him last year with the Rams. It's just one of those years. They're bad. It's kind of falls in on itself. Does he still have something left in the tank? We're going back to Seattle, re-raise his game. What do you think Matt Wagner means to the Seahawks this year?
Yeah, the big thing there is their recent first-round pick, Jordan Brooks, unfortunately tore his ACL late last season, so I doubt he plays the first, 5-6 weeks. I don't know how long that'll last. So, Wagner will be big there. I will say, here's, me being honest. Like, he was, I think, our highest-graded linebacker, which is really because the Rams didn't ask him to do a whole lot. He has lost a step. He can't cover like he used to be able to cover. He still knows where the play's going 95% of the time. Like, he obviously is just so sharp and cerebral that it helps him. That position, just being in the right spot, is half the battle. But he's not Bobby Wagner of old. I think he's really kind of a holdover until you get a healthy Jordan Brooks, who I think is one of the better young players at the position. But yeah, he's not going to be a liability. He's not a game changer like he once was.
At PFF_Brad, make sure you follow Brad Spielberger on Twitter. You can see him at Pro Football Focus, overthecap.com. Last one from me, Brad. How many holdouts are we going to have? We mentioned Zach Martin. Do you sense, a lot of guys? I know one of your ex-team, Daniil Hunter, that's a big story out in Minnesota. How many other stories like that are we going to see around the NFL?
Chris Jones, I doubt will be there until he gets a new deal. Probably a bunch. They could be hold-ins where they show up now and then say they have back spasms and just don't do anything. To avoid getting fined $50,000. So, but yeah. I think a decent amount. We mentioned those three off the top of our heads, but there are probably more players out there that are not happy with their current contracts.
Yeah, I actually enjoy hold-ins much better than holdouts because the narrative and the spins are more entertaining prior to. And the Eagles have none of that. How much does something like that help or hurt a team? I don't know that it can possibly help unless they get something done and everybody's happy and copacetic. But how much of an effect do you think something like that actually does have in hurting a team trying to get to its preseason?
I think it depends. I think sometimes it gets overblown to where it's like, okay, I don't think Daniil Hunter needs to work on his get off in July. I think he'll be fine and he'll show up. Chris Jones, same thing. Like, I think they'll, and the teammates aren't like, oh, we don't know how to play with Daniil Hunter. So I think But I think where it gets interesting is when it gets very contentious and gets a little bit nasty, and then you kind of have the locker room turning against the front office. But I don't think we really have that right now for any of these situations, at least as of yet. But yeah, a guy not being there does not matter. I think we overinflate the value. If you're a rookie, sure. If you're a 9th-year edge rusher, you don't need to be there until week 1.
Who wins more games this year, Colts or Cardinals? The 2 ex-Eagle coordinators, neither one of them look like they're headed to the playoffs with their new teams. But somebody's got to win more. Somebody's going to win less. Who wins more, Colts or Cardinals?
Yeah, the big variable is Kyler Murray, which kind of complicates it. But I'll go with the Colts. I think the Cardinals roster is the worst roster in the NFL by a decent margin. Whereas the Colts, I know they were very bad last year, but they have talent. They just need to play better.
Yeah,
so,
they do. Yeah,
I'll go Colts.
Yeah, they're.
Brad, always a pleasure. Whenever you come on, we're going to tap into you as often as your schedule allows. Thank you for doing us again today. And yeah, take a deep breath this week. I know that 9 camps opened up, which means you're already on one. But next week, the fun really starts when everybody's in camp. We'll be checking you out on PFF and Over the Cap. Thanks much for jumping on Birds 365.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Brad.
Brad Spielberger, as good as there is in the country at understanding, explaining cap-related questions and issues. And yeah, he's on the same page as you and I, John. We all feel badly for the running backs, but there's no answer. There's your supply and demand stance is absolutely on point. What are you going to do? Renegotiate, like I said to Brad. Yeah, they're going to reopen the collective bargaining agreement with 7 years to go. Both sides are going to come together and say, we need to figure out how to take better care of the running backs. Not happening. No chance. No how.
Yeah.
John McMullen, Jody McDonald, Mac and Mac guys. We're going to come back, put a bow on the show here on Birds 365.